Good afternoon, everyone. This is Yvette Kelly with the Community Technical Assistance Center, and I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, Resilience Unleashed, Supporting Youth-Guided Practice. Before we get started, I want to take a moment to orient everyone to the WebEx system so you know how to participate in today's event. If you have not done so already, please call into the webinar using the audio conference information found in the event info tab above the slide deck. Upon joining the webinar, you will be placed on mute to avoid any background noises that may distract from others listening to the webinar. If you come across any technical issues during today's event, please chat to the host, Brianna, who should be able to assist you. During today's webinar, you have the opportunity to submit questions to the presenters by typing your questions into the chat box, which is located on the right-hand side of your screen. If it doesn't appear, please click the dialog bubble on the top right toolbar and it should pop up for you. You may send in your questions at any point during the webinar, and we will address them during the Q&A portion at the end of today's presentation. Today's webinar recognizes the pivotal role organizations play in the success of implementing and supporting youth-guided practice. Today we will hear from Stephanie Orlando, who is the Executive Director of Youth Power, along with Dominica Jeffries, who is the Hudson River Regional Youth Partner of Youth Power as well. Youth Power is the New York State network of young people who, through peer mentoring and advocacy, support the voice of young people. And so we're very excited to have them on to talk about all of the work they do. Before we move forward, though, we always like to know who it is that we have on the webinar. So we're going to ask you to take a few minutes, and if you could just let us know who is joining us today, and let us know what your role is in your agency. So we're going to give you a few minutes to complete this poll. So if you can just take a few minutes and let us know what your role is by answering this poll, that will be very helpful. And that way we would know who is joining us today. So we'll give you a few minutes to do that. So again, if you could just take a few minutes and respond to our poll question, just to let us know who's joining us today. Very helpful. Great. So it looks like we have a fair mix of different roles within a variety of agencies, and that's great because today's webinar is really going to focus on strategies for engaging and supporting and sustaining youth partners in our organizations. And so once again, we'd like to thank you for joining us, and I'm going to pass it on over to Stephanie for her to tell you more about the great work that she and her team do with Youth Power, and again, to talk about some of the strategies and how we can support youth voice and youth partners within our agency. There you go, Stephanie.
Thank you, Yvette. We're really excited to be presenting today on the CTAC webinar. It's great to, I just scrolled through the panelists, and it's great to see some people that we know and many people that we don't. To kick us off with our presentation, Dominica is going to share our mission statement and a little bit more about what Youth Power is. So, Dominica?
Hi. So good afternoon, everyone. So here at Youth Power, we are the New York State network of young people who have been labeled and are seeking change. Together, we've decided to speak up about our experiences because no one knows what it is like for us better than we do. Through peer-to-peer mentoring, we empower young people to be active citizens that are aware of government operations, their rights, and the ability to use their voices to influence policies, practices, regulations, and laws. We are young people helping other people, ensuring availability of self-help and peer support while changing systems so that young people get the support they need with the respect and dignity they deserve. At Youth Power, along with many of the other youth movements, we follow the motto, nothing about us without us. So why? Why we're here today and why we do what we do is because if you had a problem in the Black community and you brought in a group of white people to discuss how to solve it, almost nobody would take the panel seriously. In fact, they'd probably be a public outcry. It would be the same thing for women issues or gay issues, but every day in local arenas all the way to the White House, adults sit around and decide what problems youth have and what youth need without ever consulting us. And that's a quote from Jason, who's 17 years old, and he is from the youth force member. So youth-guided means that young people have the right to be empowered, educated, and given a decision-making role in the care of their own lives, as well as the policies and procedures governing care for all youth in the community, state, and nation. This includes giving young people a sustainable voice and then listening to that voice. Youth-guided organizations create safe environments that enable young people to gain self-sustainability and recognize that there's a continuum of power that should be shared with young people. And this definition was developed by Youth Move National. So there are 5 primary values in youth-guided practice. Strengths-based, sharing power and empowering young people, recognizing and avoiding adultism, valuing cultural competence, and valuing youth culture. Young people can be involved in many different ways within systems of care, but how they're involved and the level of authentic partnerships makes the difference. These 5 primary values in partnering with youth, or these are the 5 primary values that are important in partnering with youth.
There is research that's out there that's shown that youth civic engagement is a powerful approach for reaching youth who are often not reached by conventional youth development programs. And there's 3 reasons for this that the research from Policy Research Associates, their Innovation Center for Community and Youth Development, has produced. Those 3 reasons are: in civic activism, organizations provide youth the space to focus on their own culture and backgrounds, that civic activism provides a forum for youth to reflect on and address day-to-day challenges faced by their families and communities, and that it provides applied vocational and leadership opportunities. I wanted to just take a second and focus on the second one a little bit more. And within our world, you know, we often talk about trauma-informed care and how it changes the question from what's wrong with us to what happened to us. And similarly, with what this research has proven is that changing that question on what's wrong with you to what's going on in the community, what are the issues that are leading to the struggles that young people are facing, by changing that dynamic of the question, more likely young people will engage in those processes and be able to say, yes, you know, it's not just us that are the problem. We're a part of a larger problem that we can help to change and address. Some of the benefits to youth, and people often think about youth involvement, they think about the benefits to youth. And to start off, obviously there are a lot of benefits for young people being in youth development, youth engagement, youth voice opportunities. Some of those are obviously building confidence through completing empowerment tasks and feeling heard, making friends and building a peer support network that maybe they'll have for the rest of their life, and people that have similar experiences and cultural backgrounds or ideas as they have. They can help create a better system and feel that they're turning some of those negative experiences into positive ones and giving back to others and helping make the system better for the youth that are the next generation. Understanding community and government in a different way. Certainly, as we've learned, what we learn in school is not really like, oh, what a commissioner is or what, you know, how the government really works in terms of our service systems and how those things connect to the legislature and to, you know, our rights and laws that are out there. So being able to be a part of that and develop that better understanding is really powerful, to feel like, wow, I know how to use my voice and where to use it. Those leadership experiences, also just being able to build those skills that to self-advocate and to help direct others, working in team, being a problem solver, collaborative skill building, those are all 21st century employment skills that young people can develop through civic engagement work and through work directing programs and being youth guided. And very important is also those connections and professional resources. I cannot tell you how often members of Youth Power have, you know, either called upon me or a government people that they've interacted with to write letters of reference for college and grad school, to be a reference for employment, and all of those connections they build by getting out there and meeting people and other people getting to see the quality of the work that the youth put forward so that they can build those connections that will lead to other opportunities in their future and other experiences. The benefits to others, though, is a really key part that we encourage everyone to focus more on. Like, what do you get out of including young people in guiding the work that you do? So, you know, one of the key things is a better understanding of the needs of youth and the population that you are particularly serving. And I want to just point out, too, that when you're engaging young people in this work, hopefully it is young people that you're serving within your own program so that you can have a better idea of what they're facing in the community, how they see the world, how they interpret the things that are going on around them so that you can better engage them in the work that you're doing and understand how to talk to them in a way that makes it most relevant to their understanding and their worldview. You can also develop more fresh and innovative ideas that can create creative solutions that often we don't see because, as you know, I'm putting me in the we category of older people now because I'm 34, and I think, like, in my career I've you know, become more like, well, that's just how it is. Sometimes you think like, oh, well, that barrier's there because that's the way it's always been, whereas young people coming in, they don't know the way it's always been. And so sometimes they can come in and just, like, break down that glass barrier that you are looking through that isn't really, you know, as big of a deal as you think it is. They come up with those creative solutions and have those innovative ideas that also are, again, from their generational point of view. So maybe use of technology and different things that the youth culture is using, which would be more specific to and helpful to your approach that you're moving forward. So, you know, maybe they'll come forward and say, we want a text line, where you are still in the mindset of phone lines and calling people, but that's the way that youth communicate. They can bring clarity to your mission and organization, enhance that commitment and energy level that adults have. Like, it's so exciting to hear from young people and see their enthusiasm and their energy as you move forward. And so to be able to tap into that and you know, see the world through their eyes can be very uplifting and help re-energize people that have maybe been in the job a really long time and kind of need that burst of energy and new perspective. They help increase the understanding of the way young people are fed and really break down those cultural stereotypes that may be out there, both about youth culture, but also other, you know, cultures that the youth and their families come from. So the last one on this is the understanding of the positive things youth have to offer. Obviously, young people are in these services because they're struggling with something, and often the focus can be on those areas of development and what those negative behaviors and things that the youth have. But by engaging young people in activities and these opportunities, you're able to see that young person that maybe is loud and, you know, challenging, being able to challenge that into a leadership role where, you know, you're able to use that strong will and that voice for a positive and be able to see maybe the creative skills that they have or the other talents that the young people have outside of the areas that maybe led them into services in the first place.
So this image that you see in front of you is the ladder of youth participation. When building a partnership with young people, it requires an understanding of the views of young people and their willingness to change the perceptions if necessary. Hart's ladder, which is what you see in front of you, or the ladder of youth involvement, illustrates the different relationships adults can choose to engage in with youth. Each rung of the ladder stands for a different type of youth involvement. As you move up the ladder, closer to the top, maximum youth involvement is approached, and a youth-adult partnership becomes a reality. Understanding how adults view young people can help adults refrain from tokenizing youth. Young people can be involved in many different ways. but how you are involved and the level of authentic partnerships makes the difference. When using the ladder of youth participation, it's important to note that the illustration is only meant to measure each instance of youth voice. Groups and organizations don't have to move up each rung in order to achieve authentic youth-guided care. So youth involvement in organizations. Being youth-guided can take many different shapes and forms, and typically individuals may think that in order to be youth-guided, a youth group must be created, and this is not the case. Groups are only one form of youth-guided care, and the only true youth-guided, and you're only truly youth-guided if the focus is determined by youth input and perspective. So some ways that an organization can know if youth involvement is being achieved is through evaluations. So quality and satisfaction, staff evaluations, and program evaluations. They also know through their hiring practices, their environmental design, their social marketing, outreach, and engagement, strategic planners, program design, implementation, and oversight, youth trainers and youth employees. So if you are hiring youth who are peers as employees and to help participate in trainings, you know that you're reaching a level of youth involvement. Youth on standing work groups, committees, task force, and things like that. And youth and young adult serving on board of directors. So all of these are ways that you know if you're reaching a level of youth involvement. One thing I'd like to note is that one example of youth involvement that I like to share is when youth are used to help hire staff. It's a great way to know whether or not a staff person will be able to truly engage with youth, but also helps the organization as a whole hire people who will be able to appropriately work with young people.
And DeMonica and I didn't really introduce ourselves in terms of our peer experience at the beginning, but both of us are from system of care world and have personal experience in that. And you know, one of the things that was early in my career was going back to the residential treatment facility where I had been a resident and being a strategic planner and being on their strategic planning committee. And not only was I able to help shape the world of that residential for the next several years in terms of their goals and how they were going to reach those goals, but I was also able to develop skills in terms of strategic planning, which I still use to this day, directing youth power. So both myself and the agency were able to benefit from my perspective being a part of that strategic planning committee. And so that's really what we're talking about with all of these things here. When you engage a young person in this work, you gain a new perspective on, and they can help you shape that plan or that goal or the people that you hire to be most engaging to the young people and to be most serving them in a way that they feel is important and relevant. So some other examples that we have to point out to are, one is in Westchester County, where in the 90s they developed this document called What Helps, What Harms, and they've since developed it several other times and redone this process. But I'll just start off with the original one, which has been really influenced the world of youth involvement in New York State and nationally, where even the most recent young person that helped to develop the most recent version, she also went nationally, Jessica Grimm is her name, and helped Youth Move National develop a national What Helps, What Harms, which is really helpful. And what they did was they held community forums with youth and asked a simple question, what helps and what harms in different scenarios. So for instance, what helps, what harms in school? What helps, what harms in a residential facility? What helps, what harms in the hospital? In your community-based services? All of these things. And the what helps was often things that they either really had or that they thought would be helpful. So it's not limited to just the things that currently exist. And what I really like about this and why I encourage people to ask these questions, what helps, what harms, is that it really boils it down to the young person's experience, something that they can easily speak to. I recently had a county talk to me about, they asked this question of, of youth of if they could wave a magic wand, what would the system look like? And their answer was very broad and not really informed, because they don't really, at that point, the young people didn't really understand how the system worked. But if you ask them what helps and what harms and what would have helped, and the answers become very different. And what Westchester County has done with the answers to these questions is they developed a document that then they brought around to all of these different places and helped them inform how they could change or how they could improve the services that they were offering in all of these various settings that they asked the youth about. And it was a diverse group of youth that they asked these questions to. And I think that's a very important point to make, too, is that we're not just asking one or two youth, but we're holding community forums and getting a diverse group of young people to answer these questions. Another example is one that's very close to us, is the development of youth power through Families Together in New York State. So Youth Power, we have been a part of the Families Together in New York State umbrella, and Families Together is a family-run organization. And when we had come from a state-operated, Youth Advisory Council at first, and when the Youth Advisory Council learned that Families Together might maintain the contract, we wrote them a letter asking for several things, which was, the hiring of staff, youth that were young people, having youth on the board of directors, all sorts of things. And over the years, Families Together has implemented that, where they have a percentage of the board that must be young people under the age of 26, I think, and they have to, we have youth involvement in every aspect of what Families Together does, and that happened over time. So when there's strategic planning going on in Families Together, those board members are involved, and we have the ability to really influence the things that are happening within the agency. So really not only, they could have just easily said, oh, we'll get funding and we'll just make this youth committee and dictate what they do, but they gave us the autonomy to become our own network, but also to advise in the whole organization in terms of our policies, procedure, the strategic plan, the mission statement, all of that by having that percentage of the board that are full voting members. It really did infuse youth involvement into the organization. We encourage people to start off by evaluating your readiness. And what we mean by that is looking at, the strengths, the challenges, attitudes, and organizational values that align with youth involvement. So, where in your organization are you? Do you have people that are open to hearing from young people? Do you have people that are kind of don't understand what these young people might be talking about, and these youngsters, I don't know if their point of view, you want to evaluate that. Where are you in the starting point? What are the policies and procedures that are in place in terms of youth actually operating their own meetings, having a say in terms of the way that you operate, being able to maybe even along the lines be trainers or co-trainers or driving people? What are your policies and procedures, and are they ready for full, authentic youth-guided practice? You want to think about the staffing and support that you're offering. So if you're going to be hiring youth or that you're going to be operating a youth advisory council or something like that, what support do you have available within your agency so that the young people, when they decide to do something, they have a coach or someone to help them figure out how they can do it and how they can accomplish it and support their effort. Same with the budget. Is there a budget for these projects and things? Transportation funds, maybe stipends or incentives, or just even food is a big piece, or an activity or things that they want to do. And if not, how are some ways that you can include young people in developing that budget, writing grants, holding fundraisers, things of that nature? You want to evaluate the opportunities and where you currently are. Those educational and training and employment opportunities, they all go together. So, what are the opportunities there for your full staff of your whole organization, your agency, to understand what the role of youth peers would be and what youth serving on committees or other groups as change agents, what that might look like. So really evaluating all of these things first before you really develop your plan is key.
So these are 10 steps to engage youth. The first step is to look. So who are the specific youth that you want to engage? Second is name. What exactly do you want to engage youth in? And listen. What do the young people you want to engage care about? And what do they say that they're sustainably connected with? Acknowledge. Let youth know you're listening to them by affirming, denying, or inquiring further about what they're saying. Authorize. Provide active opportunities for young people to experience authority through learning and strategic positioning. Act. Take action with or support young people as they create change. Reflect. Look back strategically at youth involvement and identify new learning challenges, success, and opportunities. Critique. Examine the elements, name the outcomes, determine the inequities, and actively challenge barriers. Strategize. Determine new avenues for action and outcomes. And finally, close the loop. Use the learning, critiques, and strategies you identified to strategize new opportunities for youth engagement. So here are some personal practices that will help you become more youth-guided. The first one is to challenge yourself to be honest and open and take risks to address racism, sexism, adultism, ableism, classism, homophobia, and transphobia head-on. When you witness or experience an abuse of power or oppression, interrupt the behavior and address it on the spot or later, either one-on-one or with a few allies. Address oppressive behavior that will encourage change. Challenge the behavior, not the person. Be sensitive and promote open dialogue. Don't generalize feelings, thoughts, behaviors, etc. to a whole group. Give people the benefit of the doubt and don't make assumptions. Recognize that when someone offers criticism around oppressive behavior, to treat it as a gift that is rather than challenging the person or invalidating their experience. And finally, be willing to lose a friend, but try not to throw away people who mess up because you don't want to be associated with them. Help them admit what they did and help them take responsibility. So those are some practices, and these are some organizational practices. So commit time for organizational discussions on discrimination. Set goals, set anti-oppression goals, and continually evaluate whether or not you are meeting them. Promote anti-racism, anti-heterosexism, anti-adultism, anti-transphobic, anti-ableist messages, and analyze in everything you do, in and outside of activist space. Remember, these are complex issues and that they need adequate time and space. And create opportunities for communication skill development. Promote egalitarian group development by prioritizing skills shares and being aware of who tends to do the work, who gets recognized, supported, and solicited. So some personal practices that you, Okay, so some more organizational practices that you can, that your organization should be practicing to help become more youth-guided. Respecting different styles of leadership and communication. Avoid tokenism and don't push historically marginalized people to do things because of their oppressed group, which is tokenism. Base selection on their work, experience, and skills. Hold people accountable of behavior. Make a collective commitment to hold people accountable. Safe and nurturing place for everyone. Accessible recruitment material. Have recruitment material and sessions be available in multiple languages, sign language, and Braille. Have easy reading for people who may have reading or sight disabilities. If your organization specifically wants to recruit young people who have not yet completed high school or college, do not require long application essays and rate them based on their grammar writing skills. And finally, ensure marginalized groups have decision-making power and represent marginalized communities with power over finances, programming, and staffing.
When you're ways of including young people into your existing committees and structures, you should consider how to make meetings accessible to young people. So, for instance, we would start off by suggesting that you include more than one youth. You don't want to just have one young person and say, oh, young person here in the committee. Really, most likely, at least two. And why we say two is not only so that they can support each other and not feel alone in the room, but also because sometimes you're just going to have attendance issues where you're only going to end up with one of them there to begin with, but at least then they can check in with each other and go back and forth and make sure that the youth piece is covered. But if you can have more than two, it's even better. And what you also should consider is the scheduling of meetings. So are they at a time where young people can go? Let's say you want a high school student there, but you meet at 10 a.m. Well, they're in school. Do you want them to miss school when they might already have attendance issues due to their disability or mental health status? No, you want to make the meeting at a time where they can attend, maybe in the late afternoon. And I think that that's a real true sign of if people have the attitude ready to be youth guided, is if they're willing to meet at 3:30, 4 p.m. as part of their committee structure. Providing information is really key as well. You want to make sure that young people know what's going to happen. So a briefing before and after the meeting can be really helpful, where you present, here's some of the things that are being discussed at this next meeting. Let the young people ask any framing questions so that they can be most meaningfully engaged in the committee work. Same with support during the meeting. Often we recommend a buddy kind of system so that maybe even I do this now as an adult ally, where I'll sit next to a young person in a meeting so that they can write me a little note and say, are they talking about this? You know, maybe connecting the dots for them, making sure that they know that they're on point with what they're talking about. That little extra confidence that they get from the message back, yes, that's right, can really get that smile on their face and get them right into the conversation, because now they're confident about what they're talking about. So what support can you offer during the meeting? Be clear on roles and expectations of everyone. That means, like, if you're including them in the committee, does the rest of the committee know the importance of the youth by their joining the team? Transportation is often a barrier, so what are some ways to address that and to make sure that the young people are able to attend? Stipends and incentives are important, and I think long-term, when you're talking about young people serving on committees and things, often everyone else sitting at that table is paid. So why would you expect the young person to be doing it as a volunteer? So thinking about ways of utilizing stipends that are sustainable, because sometimes the stipends can be a real deterrent. Like we don't necessarily recommend that you have a stipend for a youth attending a youth group or youth council meeting, but when they go to another group as an advisor or to bring their expertise, they should be paid for that expertise. Why we don't necessarily recommend it for groups and councils is because sometimes that's the only reason that young people are going, and not to commit to the youth movement themselves or to build it. And not that we say that you can't pay youth for that, but for instance, our VOYA group that's in Rensselaer County, Voices of Youth Advisors, the young people don't get paid to go to their own meetings, but when they go represent that group at the county level or participate in town hall forums or produce and organize and plan those types of meetings, they get stipends for those activities. And that we have a process where we know that those funds will be continued as long as the group is continued. And other incentives can be as simple as the things that I talked about earlier, references, helping young people actually write on their resume like the experience that they've been building through your committees or through the activities that they've been doing with you. That is huge. If you actually sit with the young person and help them list it properly, that takes a time commitment, but it's a big incentive. You want to make sure that young people know the results of their information and feedback, and that they're recognized for their contributions to the team. So if you're putting all of the contributing people to a report or something, they're listed and they're recognized as part of that, and they're part of every phase of that process. Another thing you want to consider is how to create safe spaces. what we often do with Youth Power is we start off most of our youth groups as much as we can, or at least during even the registration process, we'll ask, what pronoun do you like to use? So he, she, her, him, they, your name, whatever. However you like to be identified, what name do you like to be called by? This can make a world of difference for making people feel safe and included. And we also ask, what do you need to feel safe and included? And what can you offer to others to feel safe and included? And that might mean like talking about personal space or help reading or being able to offer to someone that extra support to listen or to help read. Those things are important to create that space of mutual support and peer support within the group so that people understand what each other's needs are and respect that. We want to make sure the space is accessible. We at Youth Power are cross disability, so you've heard us talk about different things around disability accessibility, and mental health is universal. And so we really want to make sure that the space is physically accessible to everyone, but also anxiety is a big thing. You don't want to be too crowded or feel cornered in a room, so how do you make that room accessible? Providing accommodations. Often young people with learning disabilities are involved, so how do you make the materials that you're developing at a reading level and at using multiple methods so that young people can be involved through different learning styles and different accommodations. And also recognizing those generational cultures, how each generation kind of sees the world differently and how their culture is slightly different, not only because of technology, but just because of what's going on during that portion of time where young people are coming into their own.
So some ways to sustain youth involvement are to engage youth in peer-to-peer mentoring. Also allowing youth to have the opportunity to continue to grow their skills in peer-to-peer mentoring. This may look like a workshop or having someone come in and give different skill-building lessons as the group continues. And this will help constant recruitment, team mentality, and sustainability of the group. Young people know other young people, so if they're mentoring each other and they're providing support to each other, they'll continue to bring them into that group. Instill a sense of ownership in the group. Allow them to make decisions and to go out and feel like this group is theirs. And a few groups that we've been working with recently, even simply having them build a name that has something to do with their community has really helped them feel like that group is theirs. And as other young people come in, they're able to feel like it's a community and it's their community. Provide social and personal incentives to the young people, and demonstrate progress and reliability. Progress may not always be a fast thing, but helping the young people see that the little steps really do matter and those things count. Also being reliable, making sure that you're available when you say you will be, and that the things that you say you're going to do, you actually follow through with. And celebrate achievements. Like I said, it may come slow, but celebrate the little achievements and celebrate the big achievements as they happen. So welcoming new members can be really difficult sometimes. So here's some ways that you can make it a little bit easier for the entire group. Determine how often you'll be accepting new members. This can be ongoing. You can have an ongoing recruitment, or you can recruit at certain times of the year. Maybe you'll just do it once a year, or maybe twice a year, or just once a month. Or maybe it's open to the public at all times. Create ways to help new group members feel a part of the group. And ensure young people are prepared for the content of the meeting. This may mean debriefing them before they come into the group of what you guys talked about last time, or what you've been talking about, or what actions have happened over the last year, so that they feel like they're coming in knowing what's going on in the group.
So again, I'll just use the Youth Power Board of Directors as an example. We have open recruitment. People just put in a letter if they are interested, and then the board interviews them. And then if they're accepted, we have an orientation call where we discuss all of youth power, the rules of the board, all that type of thing, and then they're introduced to the content that we're currently going over in all of the board meetings. So by the time they actually are joining a board meeting, they've met some board members, even if it's just through the phone, and they've been able to really be caught up so they can jump right into the conversation. And that's what works for us. Each group will be different, and it's important to explore that because often people don't look at new members enough in terms of you get a core group together and you rely on that core group, and then all of a sudden that core group ages out or moves on to the next phase of their life, and you don't have those new members. Or you're always welcoming new members, but they don't feel welcome because they don't know half of what's being discussed, and a lot of the group seems cliquish. So, you got to develop these methods, maybe buddy systems, orientations, all of these kind of things can really help sustain youth involvement by consistently recruiting and welcoming new members. Whatever phase or process you do that in, at least it should be consistent. Some of the keys to success are learning to share power and engage youth as partners. I can't stress this enough. If you're coming at things as a partner, you're wanting their input. You're gaining respect for each other's point of view and expertise. And so being able to share that power is essential to really building authentic youth-adult partnerships. Be clear about expectations and boundaries. If there's something that that the youth group it has a limit on, that they're not going to be able to organize a rally or something like that, you want to be clear on those boundaries, and if you expect something from them, what are those expectations, so that they don't find out after the fact that they should have been doing something. No shoulda, woulda, coulda here. We want to have clear expectations on what's expected. And make sure that that's used in clear language and that the young people understand it. It's not in jargon or terminology that they don't really get. We want to consider using technology and other forms of communication. At Youth Power, we're statewide, so a lot of our meetings are through GoToMeeting, and we have many members with autism and other social anxieties and things that sometimes they like to just utilize the chat box, and they're still very engaged in the conversation, but they're typing their answers, and they're still very included in a meaningful way. So how can you use technology as a tool? You want to make sure that young people have the tools to self-advocate and make informed decisions as they're part of your group. So maybe they need to ask, or raise their hand and say, I need some extra support, and be able to advocate for that extra they need. You want to ask them questions and make sure that they have a clear understanding of the material that you're working on, and really truly listen with your whole self around what the youth are saying and what their responses are. And you want to build trust, again, by following through with your commitments. I know Monica mentioned this, but we can't stress it enough. Really following through. Young people, when they think that you're not going to follow through with the things you say, they fully disengage, and they will not continue on, because unfortunately those are a lot of experiences of young people in the system. So when they feel it coming again, they're like, well, I'll leave before you disappoint me. And that's a common theme that we want to avoid. You want to keep regular contact, and nowadays it's like texting, definitely, and honestly, even in Youth Power, we use calendar items and all sorts of technology tools which are helpful. But the idea is you want to learn from the young people what the best way to reach them is, and maintain see them regularly, and you have that benefit. We'd like to talk about educating on disability history because of the results. People don't really understand where the ADA or IDEA or those things aren't taught in school, like how those came to be. And when you learn of the movement that fought for the rights or fought for mental health parity or fought for different things, then it becomes, wow, I can push for those things, or I can push to take it to the next level. And wow, look at what they did. We can do something great too. And it takes away those have around what's possible, and it just opens the world up to say, well, if they could do it, I could do it. And again, that ownership of a project. A lot of people ask us, we want to start a Youth Power group. And we don't start local youth groups called Youth Power, even in our own network and the ones that we grant fund. Like I mentioned, Rensselaer's group is called VOYA. We didn't call it Youth Power Rensselaer. And the reason for that is we want to create that sense of ownership. And it's key to what we do. And we encourage you to think of the ways that youth can build their own rules, their own structure, their own bylaws, their own group. And yes, you might need to guide them through that process or help them through that process. They do it, and they orient the new members, and they are really owning that project and that piece of how they operate. You also want to address attitudes, and Domenica talked a little bit about this in the organizational practices and in the personal practices. And so I don't really think that we need to stress it much more, but the reason that we're saying it a lot is attitude can make the world a difference. So, you know, it's worth mentioning a couple times just because we really want to see that next generation of leaders being able to be supported by adults that see them as leaders and see their true potential, and then give them the support they need with the respect and dignity they deserve to really become the best leader that they can be and to gain that experience. So often young people will say, well, we want to do this, but they're not quite sure what the steps are. As a supportive adult, you can be that, that person that helps them figure out the how and helps them develop techniques to be effective leaders and support them and be that listening ear of experience that can say, well, these are some things that might work for you. Lastly, we just want to kind of point out before we get into questions that we have regular advocacy tips of the day and a lot of information that we put up on Facebook. We highly encourage you to follow us on Facebook for those youth advocacy tips of the day and other resources. A lot of news goes out regularly through that. We're also on Twitter, Pinterest, Instagram, and Tumblr. Obviously, we're very youth-oriented, and we're still trying to figure out Snapchat and how to make that work for us. But definitely utilizing these things are great resources. Highly recommend Facebook. The other piece is that we have e-news that we put out monthly that has a lot of great resources and opportunities for young people and supportive adults. And you can register for that e-news on our website, youthpowerny.org, and there's a lot of really great information and resources listed there too, including our employee contact information and some of the initiatives that we're involved in, and even a youth involvement toolkit that we have under our YP original materials section of the website. So highly encourage you to check that out and to get regular news from us, because we do offer regular support to all of you that are on the call today. So with that, we're ready for questions.
Yeah, thank you, Stephanie and Monica. And as we begin to move into our Q&A portion of the webinar, just a reminder that if you have questions, please feel free to submit them in the chat section. And while we await those to come in, I just had a question for you guys around, I think it's important that acknowledging the important role that youth peers play, and it really speaks to the need for organizations to incorporate youth peers into service delivery. And so my question to you is, like, what have been some of the biggest barriers that agencies have identified for involving youth, and what kind of advice have you given agencies around that?
Personally, I think it's the amount of work that they think that youth involvement takes. Monica, would you agree with that? You agree? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, you know, it's kind of like, well, that and where do we find the youth? Which, the where do we find the youth is a little frustrating, because obviously if you're a youth serving agency, you have youth, and it's just a matter of engaging them. But that engagement takes time. And so to really understand and to get your organizational leadership to understand the benefit of youth involvement and how it makes your job easier in a lot of ways and improves your outcomes, that's key. And when they see that, you know, it can be something that really helps them achieve their organizational goals and helps shape their organizational goals, once that leadership really buys into it, it gets a lot easier. And it's not like it takes a whole lot of people, but it does take at least one supportive adult usually to really make a youth group start and sustain and move forward. So that commitment of the individual is important. And often it just takes a champion, an adult that wants to do it, to bring this to their leadership and say it's worth my time, and then it just happens. And then from there, once the youth group really starts and gets going, a lot of times that more senior youth leader can really take the weight off of that adult leader, because they've been there a while, and so they understand how things operate, and they can kind of carry forward that messaging and do all of that without it being too much of a time commitment. When I started as a youth leader, it was my intensive case manager that really developed the youth peer program within our community. So, you know, it was someone that I was familiar with, and over time, it became less and less work for her. So I really think that that's important.
Okay. Yes, and that was kind of going to speak to my next question, which was, I know you mentioned about having that support, and so the question was going to be, what type of support do you recommend for organizations who want to incorporate peers, and like how do you support the peers on a day-to-day basis?
So I'm sorry, you're asking like what are some supports that you would offer to the youth peers?
Yeah, like if you're in an organization, what are some of the types of supports that you want in that organization to support a youth peer in the organization?
Well, I think it looks a lot like, you know, helping them develop a plan for leadership. So let's say your group develops a structure and they have a group leader that needs to set an agenda. You know, maybe you have someone that supports them in doing that and be there as a listening ear and someone to help encourage them to help solve transportation or other barriers that come up.
Also, providing ongoing peer support for them and support and development is extremely important. Offering different trainings so they can continue to develop their skills. And peer support is still extremely important to them. So just giving them the opportunity to utilize that.
And again, going back to, you know, that peer experience and training, sometimes that's getting involved in groups like Youth Power and making a space for that. So we also offer peer leader support and development meetings in the regions, PLSD, please. And, you know, sometimes it's a barrier for us that supervisors don't understand the value of those meetings. And peer support for the peer leaders is really important because, you know, sometimes they're dealing with secondary trauma and stress from hearing other people's stories regularly. They just need other people that are breaking down these barriers and pioneering the way with youth leaders to be able to talk to others that are doing similar work, like we would want to do in any profession or any field. You want to connect with people that are your colleagues and that you're doing this work with. So not only building peer support into the group itself, but then connecting that group to other groups like it across the state and across the country.
Okay. We have another question. The question is, how do you explain to parents of children under the age of 18 what the purpose of the youth group is? So how do you go about explaining and educating parents around the purpose of like Youth Power, youth groups, and youth voice?
Well, I'll just start off by saying that there's peer support groups and then there's change, like advisory groups. And the way I would describe the benefit of peer support groups is so that your child doesn't feel alone. I cannot stress enough the importance of, you know, really connecting with other people that are struggling in a supportive and nurturing environment. So, for instance, like running peer support groups myself, you know, there would be days where young people didn't go to school, but they would show up to the support group in their pajamas and be able to talk to other young people about how to overcome the depression or the anxiety that they were having that day. And then the next day they went to school. And so being able to get that direct peer-to-peer support where it's someone else that's been through it, that isn't learning from a book. And we have to recognize also that young people, that's how they communicate. They're more likely to talk to a peer about issues that they're facing than adults. There's research that backs that statement, and so being able to be involved in a peer support group, not only does it break down that barrier that stigma creates around, how people view and other things out there, but it also helps create that natural support that peers look for to be able to have those discussions. In terms of advisory group, it's being able to build those leadership skills, being able to change the world around them and to see a value in the personal assets that they have to offer to others. I really am a big believer in the Reclaiming Youth International Circle of Courage that they use, and the 40 developmental assets that the Search Institute uses around youth development. But the Circle of Courage talks about youth really needing, in order for them to, in terms of youth development, needing the opportunity to develop mastery skills, a sense of belonging, a sense of independence, and a sense of generosity. And I think through being involved in civic activities, they're able to change the world around them and really recognize the value that they have and the power that they have as individuals to move forward. And speaking for myself, it really did change the way I viewed my own personal world and what I was capable of by being seen as a leader by my peers and by adults.
Oh, great. Well, we're running out of time, but I want to thank you, Stephanie and DeMonica, for just sharing all of your great information and great strategies for implementing youth peers and organizations. Also want to thank everyone for attending today's webinar. If you have any other questions, please contact us at ctacyorg.com. Also, just want to remind you that once you leave today's webinar, you will receive a survey. We're going to ask that you complete that survey if possible and provide your feedback on today's webinar. On behalf of CTAC and our presenters, we'd like to thank you and have a great rest of your day. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.